I became a mother at 18, not because I gave birth, but because my sister threw her own son away like trash. I was 18 when my older sister Sherry, who was 22 at the time, gave birth to a baby boy she named Luke. I still remember the first time I saw him, bundled in a hospital blanket, so small and new and unaware of the chaos he was being born into. But from the very beginning, it was painfully clear that Sherry and her then-boyfriend had no interest in being parents. They treated his birth like an inconvenience, like something that happened to them rather than a life they were now responsible for. They went out constantly, disappearing for entire nights to parties and bars, leaving Luke unattended in his crib without even the bare minimum of care. I'd come by to check on them, thinking maybe they were just overwhelmed, but what I found, dirty bottles, soiled diapers, a baby crying alone in a dark room, shook me to my core. I couldn't keep watching it happen, couldn't stomach the thought of this tiny boy being left to figure out the world alone before he could even sit up. So I took Luke in. I didn't ask for permission and I didn't wait for them to change. I just brought him home. While I was finishing my last year of school, juggling exams and late-night study sessions, my grandmother Eleanor stepped in without hesitation and agreed to take care of Luke during the day. She was the kind of woman who carried generations of strength in her bones, the kind who didn't wait to be asked when something needed to be done. We shared everything, stories, chores, quiet moments during early mornings when the house was still, and in return for her help, I did what I could to lighten her load. I cooked, cleaned, made sure her medicine was always stocked, and listened when she needed to talk. My parents, who had never really known how to deal with any of it, gave me $100 a month, just enough to cover formula, diapers, and the other basic things a baby needs to survive. It wasn't much, but I stretched it as far as I could, learned quickly how to shop smart and go without. It was exhausting, but Luke was worth every bit of it. When I turned 19, everything changed again. My parents, tired of the tension, the crying baby, the unspoken resentment filling every room, kicked us out of the house without hesitation or warning. There was no conversation, no attempt to understand what I was carrying. Just a cold, final decision that we no longer belonged there. And as if that wasn't enough, Sherry cornered me in the hallway before we left, her voice flat and without an ounce of remorse, and said, "I wish I had never given birth to Luke." That sentence lodged itself in my chest like a stone, not because I believed her, but because it confirmed what I had feared for so long, that Luke had never been more than a burden to her. It was the last thing I needed to hear, but maybe, in some strange way, it also gave me clarity. My grandmother and I didn't waste time after that. We scraped together what we had, went to a lawyer, and started the process of getting legal custody. We gathered documents, witnesses, anything we needed to prove that Luke had been ours in everything but name. And when the papers came through, when the court handed me the title that matched the truth in my heart, I officially became Luke's mother. Not by blood, but by love, by choice, and by every sleepless night I had already survived for him. My grandmother died when Luke was 6, and with her passing, it felt like the last piece of my foundation crumbled beneath me. She had been my partner in raising him, my anchor, my quiet strength when the world felt too heavy to carry alone. And suddenly, it was just me, holding Luke in my arms as he cried for the only other person who had ever made him feel safe. There was no support after that, no family stepping in, no offers of help. But we survived. I enrolled in college, determined not to let go of the future I had promised myself, and took a job at a retail store, working late shifts and weekends to keep the lights on and the fridge full. Most nights I came home with aching feet and barely enough energy to make dinner, and I would fall asleep on the couch with a textbook in my lap, Luke curled up beside me with his stuffed dinosaur, his small hand always finding mine. It wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous. But it was ours. And we made it work. A year later, just when I had started to believe that maybe this was how things would always be, just Luke and me against the world, I met Alex, the man who would one day become my husband. From the very beginning, he didn't just accept that I came with a child. He embraced it. He never saw Luke as baggage or a complication, but as someone he genuinely wanted to know, to care for, to love. The way he treated him was quiet and natural. He'd sit on the floor and play video games with him like they'd been doing it for years, or pick up a book and read fairy tales with exaggerated voices until Luke was giggling so hard he could barely breathe. Watching them together in those early days was almost too much for my heart to take. It was touching in a way that left me breathless, like I was finally seeing the family I had always dreamed of forming but never truly believed I'd have. When Luke was 8, something happened that should have brought joy but instead cracked something open. Both Sherry and I found out we were pregnant around the same time. I was cautiously hopeful, imagining how Luke might finally get to be a big brother, how our home would grow and stretch to fit this new life. But then Sherry reappeared, almost out of nowhere, with sudden interest in the son she had abandoned nearly a decade earlier. She started talking about wanting to reconnect with Luke, claiming she had changed, that she missed him, that she was ready to step up. At first, I tried to believe she meant it, even though everything inside me was screaming to be careful. And then one night, Luke came into our bedroom in tears, his face blotchy and panicked, clutching the hem of my shirt and begging us not to leave him. Through broken sobs, he told us what Sherry had been whispering to him, that now that I was going to have a real child, I wouldn't want him anymore. She had told him I would cast him aside just like she once had. My heart shattered. The cruelty of it, the manipulation, the way she tried to poison the one thing that had saved both of us. I could hardly breathe. That night, I held Luke tighter than ever and promised him that nothing and no one would ever take him from me. Not again. We cut Sherry out of our lives completely after that, without hesitation and without another conversation, because there was no coming back from the kind of damage she tried to inflict. We knew we had to protect Luke not just from her presence, but from the idea that love could be conditional or taken away. So we found a therapist who helped us navigate the trauma she had stirred up, someone who helped Luke rebuild his confidence and begin to understand that what happened wasn't his fault, that he hadn't been unwanted or replaceable. He remained our son in every possible way, emotionally, legally, spiritually, and we made sure he knew that every single day. When my second son, Ben, was born, we did everything we could to reinforce that truth. We involved Luke in every step, let him help decorate the nursery, pick out little toys, and be the first to hold Ben at the hospital. We never said half or step or adopted. We were a family, full stop. And in the soft, quiet moments between the chaos of diapers and bedtime stories, I watched Luke step into the role of big brother with love in his eyes, not fear, because he knew, without a doubt, that he had never been replaced. A few years later, just when our lives had finally settled into something peaceful and whole, Sherry reappeared like a ghost we thought we had buried for good. She began sending long, emotional letters, filled with apologies and reflections, claiming she had changed, that she regretted everything, and that she wanted to reconnect. Alex and I read them carefully, not with open arms but with guarded hearts, remembering all too well the damage she had once done. After a lot of long conversations, we agreed to keep our distance, allowing only the most minimal contact. No personal visits, no unsupervised moments with the boys, just a cautious, controlled boundary we weren't willing to compromise. Her daughter, Jamie, who was around Ben's age, eventually started coming by from time to time, mostly on weekends or holidays. She was polite, curious, and sweet in a quiet way, and our sons welcomed her without hesitation, happy to have another kid around to talk to and play with. There was something strangely healing about watching the next generation form bonds untouched by the past, but we never let our guard down completely. Because we knew, love could forgive, but trust had to be earned, and we weren't about to let our sons be hurt by old mistakes trying to wear new faces. Alex and I had built a stable life through years of careful planning and hard work, eventually moving to a good neighborhood where our sons could grow up surrounded by safety, opportunity, and a sense of calm that neither of us had known in our own childhoods. We both had steady jobs, ones we were proud of, and made sure to carve out time for the things that mattered: family dinners, weekend getaways, and quiet nights filled with laughter. Luke and Ben flourished in that environment, diving into their interests with confidence. Luke found his place in sports, while Ben gravitated toward programming and technology, and we encouraged both with every resource we had. We traveled when we could, took them to new places, and tried to give them a world that felt wide and promising. Meanwhile, Jamie's life seemed to be marked by constant instability. Sherry and her partner were always chasing something, changing jobs, moving from one rental to another, sinking further into debt without ever finding solid ground. Jamie would talk about switching schools, living out of boxes, missing payments, and hearing arguments behind closed doors. She never complained directly, but there was a tiredness in her voice sometimes that no child should have to carry. It was clear she was trying to adapt to chaos that was never her fault. And even though she wasn't mine, I found myself wishing we could give her more than just a few afternoons of peace. Sherry slowly began to blur the lines between occasional contact and dependency, and before long she started asking me for money, small things at first like mugs from Jamie's school fundraiser or to help replace a broken phone, then later for things that no parent should have to ask for like school photos and basic supplies. I wanted to believe she was trying, that she just needed a little help to stay on her feet, so I gave what I could without making it a habit. But then came the day that changed everything. I had sent her enough to cover Jamie's school pictures, something every child deserves to have, but when I followed up, Jamie quietly told me they hadn't taken the photos after all. Sherry had spent the money on cigarettes. That was the moment something hardened in me, not out of anger but out of resolve. From that point forward, I stopped sending money to Sherry altogether. If Jamie needed something, I bought it directly, whether it was school supplies, clothes, or even just a warm meal. I wanted to help the child, not enable the chaos. We bought Ben a used car for his 17th birthday, just like we had done for Luke when he reached the same age. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was reliable, and more importantly, it was a gift earned through years of love, responsibility, and the kind of consistent effort both boys had shown. Jamie, who had also just turned 17, had been expecting a car of her own. Sherry had promised her one for months, painting vivid pictures of the freedom and excitement that would come with it. But when the time came and there was no car, no plan, and no explanation beyond more financial excuses, Jamie was left heartbroken. That was when Sherry called me, furious and entitled, demanding that I buy Jamie a car too, arguing that it was only fair since our sons had both received one. I refused, calmly but firmly, explaining that this wasn't about fairness. It was about responsibility, consistency, and the reality that I wasn't Jamie's parent. The call ended in shouting, slammed words, and another wedge driven deeper. It caused a scandal within the family, stirring up old resentments and new accusations, but I stood by my decision. Support is one thing. Enabling entitlement is another. Jamie called me not long after, her voice trembling with rage and heartbreak, screaming through the phone that I loved Luke more, that I had always treated him like he mattered more than she ever did. Her words came out fast and sharp, fueled by disappointment and years of watching from the sidelines as my boys received the stability and care she had been denied. I listened, trying to stay calm, and when she finally paused to catch her breath, I told her the truth, not to hurt her but because she deserved honesty. I said, "Jamie, Luke is my son. I raised him from the cradle. I held him through sleepless nights, fed him when I could barely afford groceries, stayed awake for fevers, school projects, and broken hearts. You are my niece and I care about you deeply, but of course I love him more. I'm his mother in every way that matters." There was a long silence, just the quiet hum of the line between us, and then she hung up without another word. And even though I understood why it hurt her, I also knew I couldn't lie to soften a truth built on a lifetime of choices and consequences. A few weeks later, Jamie and I met in person for the first time since everything had unraveled, and there was something different about her. She looked tired in a way that went beyond exhaustion, like someone who had been carrying a weight no one ever acknowledged. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, and after a few minutes of silence, she opened up. She told me how painful it had been growing up in a home where she constantly felt like a burden, where love came with conditions and stability was always just out of reach. Her voice cracked when she said she used to lie in bed and wish that one day I would take her in, that I would rescue her the way I had rescued Luke. And for the first time, I saw not a teenager lashing out in jealousy, but a girl who had never been given a place to land. My heart broke for her in that moment, not out of guilt, but because no child should feel unwanted in their own home. I couldn't offer her a full-time home, not without turning my own family upside down, but I told her I would take her out on weekends, give her space to breathe and pay for therapy so she could start healing. She nodded, eyes red but grateful, and for the first time, we both sat in that truth without blame. Just two people trying to make peace with the lives we were given. But the very next Saturday, the day we had planned to meet, everything shifted when Ben had a sudden and severe asthma attack that sent us rushing to the hospital in the middle of the night. It was terrifying, watching him struggle to breathe, holding his hand while machines beeped around him, praying silently that he would be okay. In the chaos, I still thought about Jamie, still remembered our promise, and once things stabilized enough for me to step out of the room, I called her to explain. I tried to speak gently, to let her know it wasn't about canceling on her, but about needing to be where I was most needed in that moment. But she didn't want to hear it. She yelled at me over the phone, her voice full of anger and abandonment, and then she hung up before I could even finish. I sent a text later, trying to reassure her, trying to reach her through the walls that were already going back up, but there was no response. Just silence. And the ache of knowing that no matter how much I cared, I couldn't be everything for everyone. And then the worst happened, the kind of betrayal that leaves a mark deeper than words ever could. We had just come back from a quiet dinner at a restaurant, trying to reclaim a bit of normalcy after the hospital scare, when we pulled into the driveway and saw Ben's car. Smashed, scratched, windows shattered, with cruel insults scrawled across the sides in red spray paint. For a few seconds we just stood there in stunned silence, unable to believe what we were looking at, until the weight of it all hit Ben like a punch to the chest. We reviewed the security footage right away, praying it would be some random act of vandalism, something disconnected from the people we knew, but it wasn't. The cameras caught everything, clear as day: Jamie and one of her friends, laughing as they destroyed the car, their faces twisted in a mix of rage and recklessness. We handed the footage to the police, and by the next morning they were both arrested. That was the final line, one we couldn't pretend hadn't been crossed. After that, we cut off all contact with Sherry and her family completely, not out of anger alone but out of necessity. And when my own mother called to say we were overreacting, that Jamie was just lashing out, and needed compassion, not consequences, we made the painful decision to cut ties with her too. Because when someone shows you, again and again, that they will protect dysfunction over truth, you either protect yourself, or let yourself be broken in their place. And we were done being broken.